It seems I cannot trust my visual memory very far, and I'm going to presume you are not much different than me. We can, however, perform incredible feats of non-visual memory with training, remembering objects or numbers by very specific devices. For example, by creating narratives or stories about objects, or by using numbers. We remember stories and thereby remember the objects within the stories. Cultures with no written language, that is, oral cultures, store vast amounts of valuable cultural information in their stories, myths, and legends. If I ask you to remember the objects on this tray by optical means, you probably would not have much luck. But if you took some time to create a story featuring the objects, you could probably remember them all. You might create a rhyme, or with as with times tables, once one is one, two twos are two, three. But you could create a rhyme about the objects, or use the alphabet to assign a letter to each object and create memorable words or acronyms to remember the objects by. But we nevertheless seem to have very, very little optical visual recall. What we do have is astonishing recognition. For example, I could probably show you photos of 10 faces and then mix them in with 9,990 other faces you are unfamiliar with. And as you browse the mix of photos, you would probably recognize most of the faces you were previously shown. Quote unquote, I've seen that person before. Facial recognition doesn't seem to require as much space on our hard drives as recall. We perhaps don't need to remember everything about a face to recognize it, whereas we would have to memorize an enormous amount of detail and data to fully recall a face. We can't remember and list all the moles, scars, dimples, proportions of a familiar loved one's face, but when we see them, we immediately recognize them. This is why asking a witness to describe a criminal is almost impossible. To describe a witness accurately, at least. What is more possible is asking them if they recognize a criminal or aspects of a criminal. Modern forensics don't have an artist drawing a face from a verbal description, but rather someone creating composite drawings of facial features which beg recognition, and the subject can suggest warmer and cooler and thereby have the face evolve into a reasonable facsimile of the criminal. There are some astonishingly strange aspects to this recognition being described by research psychologists that make complete sense to me as someone who has spent a lot of time observing and drawing. Our brains don't necessarily recognize the details of a face holistically, but recognize the parts of a face discretely, compositely, as with a criminal composite drawing. The stunning Thatcher effect is an example of this. A few decades back, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of the UK, she was used as a recognizable face to demonstrate the effect. Here is Margaret Thatcher, right side up. Here she is upside down. The startling difference between the two pictures does not immediately leap out at us. The effect shows our perceptual inability to be fully taken aback by a right way up mouth and eyes on an upside down head versus being disturbed by an upside down mouth on a right side up head. Think about it. Double back if you need to and replay it. The difference in perception of the distortion is remarkable. It appears that our brain is interpreting the mouth and the eyes separately from its interpretation of the whole face. It fails to overtly detect something disturbing when the mouth and eyes are right side up, even though the face is upside down. This seems to be more evidence that we don't have an inner screen on which we see images as a whole, but rather store the information in discrete parcels. The illusion of our mind's eye is an emergent projection, a fabrication, a matter of filling in the blanks with discrete data, perhaps like connecting the dots. Decades previous to the discovery of the Thatcher effect, artists who had trained extensively in observational drawing and painting meddled with this psychic effect in various ways through art in order to unsettle a viewer subtly or not so subtly.